Dobry Tuborowski. Well, I got into another laughable exchange with YouTube's notorious racist libertarian, Fringe Elements, on his video, The Truly Oppressed Want Separation. Its premise was based on a half-baked American-centric view of history. American settlers who had already separated themselves by half a planet might complete the process by political separation. But the French and Russian revolutions, as examples, overthrew social structures precisely because it was impossible for a whole people to run away from its own society. Internal transformation rather than spatial separation remains the only way forward for the majority of the world's inhabitants. All of which led to a funny little diatribe, which I'll read before he deletes it or edits it beyond recognition. I replied to his video by making the comment, "Slaves try to poison the slave master." To which he replied, "Nothing wrong with killing politicians, except those who are trying to abolish the state, as I believe Ron Paul is, as he said toward the end of his book, End the Fed." To which I replied, "Statists aren't the only ones demanding obedience to authority. What's good for public masters also fits private ones." To which he replied, "Private masters, in quotes, are just employers. They procure land which you can't use while they're using it. That's about the scope of the oppression," in quotes. The actual exchange is just as oppressive as hiring a plumber on a long-term contract. If you want to talk about land ownership criteria, that can get interesting, but if you think long-term bulk rate labor trade is oppressive, I really don't know what to say. To which I replied, "The multiple criteria question always is, what right do they have to said land and how did they acquire it? To Russian peasants, that was oppression enough, and it changed the global dynamic. American sharecroppers found their exchange relationship with employers a good deal more involved than hiring a plumber, which they never had use for anyway." To which he replied, "No, asshole, I'm talking about exchange. I'm not talking about state-enforced fiat land claims, which have only occurred in statist societies because they are so obviously stupid. This is what you and the other versions of you do. You take something that has only existed with states, has never existed in all known examples of stateless societies with agriculture, and then blame feudalism on a lack of state power. You're not a wise old man. You're dumb. Your ideas are in place, and they fail. Nah, nah, nah." And he finishes his last word by blocking me from his new channel. His typical chicken shit modus operandi. I wondered just how long this exchange would continue before he popped his cork and started the ad-homs. My ideas, sad to say, are far from being in place, which shows Fringe is not a perceptive young man, but the proverbial smart-ass punk needing a session behind the storage shed where the broad board of education will apply, statist or voucher subsidized, to being irrelevant. His attitude, though, is common among other tube libertarians I've encountered, such as Eagle Eye, who also blocked me for daring to dispute his revealed wisdom. What I find to be common with these folks is a supreme narcissism that tolerates no external restraint on themselves, but willfully and vindictively imposes repression on others at the merest whiff of dissent. I'm afraid that, were their precious little utopia to be realized, society and its members would be at the mercy of private tyrants who would treat the 99% of us as toys to be played and discarded at their precious leisure, no real liberty at all. If the Koch brothers have their way this fall, that dystopia might come closer than we care to imagine. The heart of this conversation, which I'll also put in quotes, has to do with some alleged theoretical land exchange system. I don't know where this existed in reality. Maybe he's pulling Iceland out of his anus again. In most examples of stateless societies with agriculture, we find communal ownership based on family, clan, and tribe. Examples of this include North American Indians. As Chief Crazy Horse said, one does not sell the land upon which one's people walks, to Europe, where Slavic tribes possessed land and family collectives known as the Zadruga, derived from the Slavic word for friend. The Russian village commune was a survival of this early tribal settlement into the classic feudal era, which, in Russia, ended only a century ago. Exchanges of land as property were virtually unknown unless within the tribe or the village, like the annual partition of the Russian commune, but these are mediated by equivalents of the state, such as village or tribal elders. As the power of these tribes grew in their lands, the rulers sequestered parts of the common domain for their royal use, finally taking the entire domain as their royal realm and reducing others to servitude and conquering their neighbors, when they and their land weren't in turn conquered by outside powers. This was the origin of the state. In short, as per his video, there's no broad range of examples in history of sovereign individuals exchanging landed property on the libertarian model. In fact, his example of equating these land exchanges with employers is revealing, because the employee relationship is one of dependency and servitude, not equity. Completing his confusion is his statement that these employers just procure land, which you can't use while they're using it. No, Not if they're doing their own work on this land, but he's dragged in the term employer, which reveals the use of other people's labor and makes his original statement a senseless non sequitur. But then we've come to expect this loopy logic from him and the entire libertarian nexus. Uh-oh, who do we have today? No, it's not going to be Fringe Elements because he blocked this number too. Who's this? Frederick Engels, author of The Family, Private Property, and the State. You want to remind Fringe Elements that without the state he so abominates, there could not be the separation of property which he so loves. Otherwise, the mass of the dispossessed would reclaim it as their equal birthright. No wonder the Koch brothers are out to ban you from every board of education in America.